very warm welcome to everybody. I am Shraja Agrawal, and you are watching a special series on the future of deal making. In the last episode, we went into the dynamics of private equity, an industry or an asset class whose growth seems to be relentless. In this episode, we are going to talk about corporate restructuring. As the name suggests, corporate restructuring is the action taken by corporates to significantly alter their structure or the ownership. And what better than talking about corporate restructuring with senior industry professionals or gentlemen who do this as part of their daily jobs. Please help me welcome Mehul Shah and Kumar Saurabh. Mehul and Saurabh, thank you for talking to us. My first question to you, Saurabh, really is that when one talks about corporate restructuring, there are various growth drivers seen for this, right? One, of course, as organizations look at growth, they undertake corporate restructuring. And there's also one by force, or by where the ruling or the regulations come in, and that's where your insolvency and bankruptcy code piece becomes so important. When we speak to corporates, when we speak to bankers, this really has been hailed as the most transformational piece of legislation going down in corporate history, where the messaging was so clear: either pay up in a stipulated time frame or be ready to give up your assets. I want to understand from you that 3 years have really passed since the IBC kicked in. Has it really met the purpose it reached out to be? Of course, the large or the big ticket statement really is that it ushered in a behavioral change in corporates. But its two stated objectives really were value maximization and timely recovery. Has it really fared well on those counts?
So without doubt, if you see the new regime which got introduced 3 years back, it has been transformational in terms of putting right behavioral patterns and recognition of that behavioral patterns, and at the same time sanctioning those who have not been able to perform or holding on to assets where change of ownership is a requirement. So clearly from that standpoint, restructuring forced by law was something which was never seen before in India, and in that sense it was a big directional shift, if one may say so. But really, I mean, 3 years is a very short time. If you look at some of the other markets, this law has taken more than a decade or so to really evolve. If you look at the Indian context, the large sized assets have by and large got resolved through the process in last 3 years. We have seen a very significant amount of recovery for banking system, which reflects now in the quarterly results that you are seeing. Most banks are coming out of red, and we see this trend continuing. So from a broad sense, the new regime has clearly delivered and holds a very big promise for future in terms of changing the credit culture in the country. To go deeper into the development of this law, clearly, I mean, there are areas where it has delivered,
Sure.
but so many things have been done in last 3 years. You have looked at the largest cases going through a new regime of resolution. So many new stakeholders have come and participated. You have a whole new set of professionals, resolution professionals who were not existing in the Indian context, stepping forward and managing these distressed companies. So I would say, I mean, lot of positives, but we still need to improve the process as we move on, so that the objective continues to be achieved as the economy grows and more lending happens with a larger economic objective, 5 trillion economy, which is the objective of the government. You will see more debt flowing into the system, and which would clearly require that a very functional and well-oiled insolvency regime to be in existence, so that the debt capital can flow in and flow out with ease. And I think as long as that can be achieved on a continuous basis, that would really be the test of this law.
Interesting, Saurabh just mentioned about, how IBC ushered in this improved credit culture in the ecosystem. I come to you now, Mehul. When you speak with CEOs or India Inc., which is the solvent side really, has IBC has had a spillover effect on their minds that really now is the time to buck up. If I don't pay up, I really have to sort of give up on the asset. So are they also, thinking in that direction? We might not reach that position yet. Yeah.
Absolutely, because if you see, I may just want to step back even before the IBC was, enacted in that to extent, and before it was notified. uh, go back to 2014-15, where first of its kind was Sterlite Technologies Limited, when it got it demerged its power assets. It every power asset being a guzzler today to that extent, they had demerged in time then, and it was one of its own structure where a listed company had demerged an asset in which it wasn't listed, which, because it was one of the cash consuming, and it would have not got the same impact what one would have if it would have been a listed entity. So I think this was definitely there, on people, on CEOs head and on that way. So therefore, yes, definitely, this is one thing. Even today, if you speak to a lot of CEOs, a lot of large industrial houses, even, I think they would be looking at it how they can cut down the debts what they have today. And we have without naming, we have big industrial houses who's like collapse like plaque of card on that.
So, Mehul, if you were to give me three key drivers for India Inc. for doing corporate restructuring in 2020 and beyond, what would those be? We understand by law, by force of law, the IBC piece, but what about the solvent bit?
So, and you see, always you will look at consolidation. So generally, traditionally, solvent restructuring have been done internally to reorganize, the either to segregate businesses and monetize those businesses. So to give in, an illustration here would be, people have always segregated businesses. Say you can look at IFL today. It's the latest situation where one business was segregated into 4 different companies. Today they have 4 listed companies into their fold today. The other is it is by force, where one business is not doing good and it is actually pulling the other profit making business down. So that extent you can take Sterlite Technologies. That's something which comes to our mind. Third is consolidation, and you have like Skoda, Volkswagen, and Volkswagen 2.0, the India 2.0 story. If you look at their story on that as well, is something where they had a new strategy. They have consolidated all 3 companies into one company today, and they're, whilst Volkswagen and Skoda always were different companies, different segments altogether, but despite their being under one roof, they're still doing, they've started into that part today. The last part I would want to do it is this, which is pretty new, method, which of course it was there in the past, but today it has become a pretty common mechanism, is acquisition. Solvent restructuring or restructurings, look at IBC in that sense, insolvent restructurings or solvent restructurings. Acquisition has become a new mode today. Birlasoft acquiring the IT business of KPIT, which was again a listed company. So you will find a lot of restructurings now happening. Of course, there are regulatory driven restructurings like telecom transactions which happen. So all, virtually 17, 18, you would see a lot of TMT and FS sectors having a lot of transactions done there. So it was all done pursuant to reorganizations and solvent restructurings that was. So I think there is another mechanism one can look at it of a solvent restructuring there.
Interesting. I think I got a good overview from both of you in terms of the IBC piece, the solvent restructuring. I come to you now, Saurabh. You mentioned this very interesting point that, while Shreejet has got in this behavioral change and the credit culture of organizations, it will take its while. Right. And you also mentioned that in other markets, before 10 or 15 years, you can't really have the jury out yet. Tell me one thing, Saurabh, when this entire IBC conversation really started, there was so much interest from private equity investors, or distressed investors, or special situation funds. There were funds which are forming partnership with corporates. What is your sense when you speak with them? Have they been happy? And second, really, that IBC has really been amended 3 or 4 times at the time it really started, and there seems to be a notion that being a promoter suddenly is a very scary phenomenon, right? As a promoter has really become a bad word. What do you think?
But at the same time, as the market matures and the regime matures, you also don't want that a clear competition getting eliminated because of a process of law.
Sure.
And mature regimes really use this law as a stick, but not very often, so they would want to use it only in a very limited situations, very exceptional situations. By and large, they would want to solve the problem before you reach a situation where you have to put a company in insolvency. And I think that gradual shift and in the right direction is happening now. So while in insolvency, existing promoters or anyone who is in default cannot participate, you have now a regime which has been introduced by Reserve Bank last year, which allows companies which are in stress to resolve before going into insolvency.
Sure.
And that process allows the existing promoters also to participate, whether it is without complete change of control or you get a partner. Both options are available. So I think we are moving in a direction where there is a balancing act which is happening, where you are trying to send out the message, at the same time ensuring that it does not lead to value suppression.
Have there been windfall gains, you think, for the parties with the IBC process?
I mean, that's for parties to really assess. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. But I mean, if you see, I mean, a lot of situations, the resolutions have happened at a fairly low value, whether it is driven by operation. I mean, the performance of your future projections, or it is because of say limited competition, is a point of analysis. In the Indian context, it's largely public banks and financial institutions which are funding these assets. And the best outcome for these institutions is that they get best value, whether they get it from the incumbent or they get it from a new guy, strategic or financial. And which is where we see that even in a pre-IBC resolution now, while there is a lot of situations where there has been change of control, but there has also been transactions which have happened. I mean, in power sector
sure.
case, for example,
Yeah.
power sector, you have seen resolutions with existing promoters also backed by large private equity funds, distressed funds. So I think somewhere that balancing is coming.
I'll come to you, Saurabh. But I think Mehul, you wanted to say something when he was saying, and also and he mentioned this very interesting point that the entire idea is that all stakeholders are happy. But have they really been happy? Because the question is, let's just give an example of Essar Steel, for instance. I mean, it took just so long for the case. By that time, the investors who participated got completely anxious.
I think the way the act is there today, the law as it stands today, there is definitely a financial creditors have an upper hand over others into workmen and financial creditors.
Financial creditors have an upper hand.
This question has gone all the way up to Supreme Court. Supreme Court clearly feels that it is the committee of creditors which needs to take decision. At the same time, I mean, committee of creditor comprises of only financial creditors, so naturally decision making is by financial creditors. But I would think that the law puts onus on committee of creditors, being a statute, I mean, body created through a statutory process, to be responsible. And I think that messaging is quite clear. You have seen amendments in insolvency law requiring fairness in dealing with operational creditors. So that's a good shift.
Interesting. I would also like to sort of bring this up that, I think we really saw the animal spirits of India Inc. Really, I mean, for instance, it was the first time that, IBC was hailed as this once in a lifetime opportunity. We saw corporates resorting to mudslinging, in houses. We also saw corporates taking to each other on Twitter. Right. We also saw corporates, actually bringing out the past of the other company. So because, it was such a once in a lifetime opportunity to acquire that asset. I want to come to you, Mehul, that, usually India Inc. gives that picture of camaraderie, from a distance. But this really showed, where they can get, to what limit to acquire an asset. We talk about solvent restructurings. Have there been revelations to you also where you have seen a certain side, of India Inc. And one could say that, okay, 2020, we are going to see this extra aggressive phase of India Inc. which you have not seen before.
2020, definitely there's going to be a time where you have precedents in front of you. You've seen Essar Steel losing, the promoters losing Essar Steel. You've got Alok being lost. So all big ones, big industries, top 12, what we talk about, the promoters have seen them going, from their hands, and virtually it's as good as, so they have nothing else to do now. A lot of promoters to that extent, and therefore, plus in addition to that, they still have that additional liability of the guarantees which they have given to the financial creditors. So with keeping all this in mind, definitely people are going to think twice before letting things go beyond a particular point. One would definitely start thinking about having debts reorganized in on time, and therefore which is going to put in more and more solvent restructurings happening there to that extent. So
I have a slightly different
Sure.
take on this.
Yeah.
I mean, see, animal spirits of competitors being on full display, there's nothing wrong about it. I mean, you want more competition, and if that competition leads to some healthy banter, there's nothing wrong about it. As long as you have rules of the game which is very clearly set out and it is fair for everyone, I don't think that anybody can have any thing bad to say about it. And I think the regime, as I said, has been new for everyone, and
Sure.
everyone is adjusting. But in 2020, what we see and what we expect is that all the stakeholders are mature, and whether it's incumbent or the new guy, they realize that, I mean, it's value which is going to drive. And as long as the rules of the game are well set, I mean, let the value play out and decide who's the winner.
Let me ask you the flip question. He mentioned this point that, Shrija, some of these promoters actually lost assets. It is the reality, SR, Alok. And some of them really have nothing to do now, plus they have liabilities to service. So what is your key advice to promoters, at this point of time? And where do we go from here? Is personal bankruptcy the path ahead? Because in the West, it's a very established phenomenon, right? Group bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy. So what is your advice to promoters in this direction?
Advice to anybody who is in a borrowing lending situation is to take timely action and not hedge your bets on delay in the system, because that's not going to happen. The system is going to act fast,
That era is gone.
and it will give you time only up to a certain time till you are able to manage. Shareholders will have right, but once the distress process starts, it's creditors who will have the final say in how things are run. So I mean, time is of essence, and people have to understand that and act promptly.
Interesting. You spoke about animal spirits and you spoke about the fact that, personal bankruptcy, perhaps we could look at that. I want to understand this from, both of you. It's an open-ended question. Is that, when we speak about M&A, which really is at the heart of solvent restructuring or insolvent restructuring, and we have seen we have seen M&A volumes also going up. My question to both of you is that when you speak to CEOs, really give us a sense of the boardroom discussions right now. Because ultimately we are in an era of uncertainty right now. There are various kind of disruptive factors which are there. One is, of course, the US-China trade relations. One is the pandemic crisis that we have right now. The third really is our growth slowing down. We're not really on a high growth trajectory. So how are these conversations becoming more and more part of the boardrooms? Give us a sense or color there, that how does M&A evolve or thrive in times of uncertainty? Because when we speak to CEOs, one thing that they like is certainty. They want to put money when times are certain. Right now the times seem to be extremely uncertain. Both of you want to take a stab at this?
how things are going to go on the shareholder front or on the monetary front, but one will also have to see how the regulators are going to look at it.
So what is your advice to promoters? Should they all know about IBC?
And everybody needs to be conscious of the fact that it's not a situation where shareholders will get to run a company in distress for a very long period of time. So that's a very big shift, and if you are looking to grow today, I mean, at a macro level globally, you have China,
Sure.
US issues which are there. For a country like us, it's a big opportunity, and evaluation and successful implementation is going to be the key of who moves forward and who just gets in, but probably does not come out as successfully as some of the others.
You spoke about the good, bad, and the ugly, while you were very conservative on the bad and the ugly bit. I'll come to you now. And you mentioned this very interesting point that Shrija, we also see, is entire business restructuring being driven by growth, for instance. You gave the example of Volkswagen and Skoda. Back home, we also have Reliance, the way it is restructuring its business. We also have a chairman message coming from Tata's entire Tata One strategy, perhaps not implemented so much. So really, besides the IBC, the internal restructuring piece or the corporate restructuring driven by M&A is also a very, very strong piece one sees. If you were to give me a sense or a semblance that you get as we move into 2020, how is the pipeline looking like? Which could be these sectors, or which could be, you think, the primary key levers to this M&A movement? What is your sense there?
Today, one would look at restructuring because it's a mechanism. It also is a mechanism of listing entities without going into the process of having the entire IPO processes undertaken. You can list a company without going through that rigmarole what you ultimately have. So with AGR rules coming in, I think one would also want to have other businesses segregated, out of it, and to have monetization. To monetize those assets, one may want to have it, separately run by a separate management. So, each of these businesses, which otherwise are being run by the same set of management, today you can have a separate management, separate companies listed, and carry out those businesses which are there.
We spoke about this entire, drivers for restructuring. IBC, we spoke quite a bit. You also spoke about solvent restructuring. Now tell me a little about, tax, which really has been the cause of concern for a lot of stakeholders, domestic and international. What are the motivations when it comes to mergers and demergers, keeping tax at the center? What are the trends you're seeing in that direction?
Without naming transactions, a majority of it, if it were done under regular acquisition mode, there could be capital gains which would come in the hands of the sellers. Here, by doing a merger or a demerger, you're saving those things which ultimately is tax neutral in the hands of shareholders which are there.
Sure.
Pre-petition tax claims are addressed, but as part of the resolution process, if there is a tax which is attracted, that there is no exemption really. I mean, in some ways one can work out, but that's an expectation which really the new investors would have, and if that can be addressed in some ways, that can probably give a bigger boost.
So we spoke about the opportunity quite a bit, and you also mentioned that uncertainty presents an opportunity in itself. Let me talk about the challenges. As we move forward, what are the key challenges that both of you see in this restructuring / M&A process as we envisage and enter the new decade?
The regulatory regime, I would put it one. Number two, the way the NCLTs and have been operating today. It is really difficult for an acquirer to be sitting on the fence waiting for the orders of the NCLT to be issued. And so yes, definitely there have been some changes in Companies Act, what you have, where only a 10% shareholder can object, or a 5% in value a creditor can object. But there are challenges.
My question to you, Saurabh, really, and he said that a lot of water has flown under the bridge. You have to see how it evolves. If you were to have IBC 2.0, and you were to sort of go back in time, what were the key changes that you would draft in IBC?
Section 29A is one change in law which had caused a lot of delays in the process. While it may have sent that message, but I think that objective could have perhaps been achieved only by allowing competition to decide the winner rather than this kind of a judgmental approach. More clarity in the regime, what happens to pre-petition claim, can government terminate a concession because of insolvency. That clarity can also lead to a better outcome when you are dealing with concessions. So these are two clear things which I would think, and probably I would say create a better infrastructure in terms of being able to do a faster resolution.
Well, we spoke about, this entire restructuring being driven by, regulatory forces. He spoke about IBC in detail, but what about one specific regulator, SEBI, who's playing a critical role when it comes to M&A? Tell us and give us some sense about that.
Yes, when it comes to listed companies, SEBI has actually, created such kind of legislations which has not only impacted, which is virtually to an extent safeguarded the interest of minority shareholders. And talking about, restructuring per se, SEBI per se has, issued circulars and LODR where it virtually regulates the provisions in relation to the scheme. Somewhere, it is a time consuming thing again. So for the ease of doing business, if the so-called what we call here as ease of doing business here in India, and one of the concerns that a lot of investors, cross-border investors that come in, one would want to always look at that if the process which is there, if that can be shortened, along with the NCLT, even the process at SEBI that we have, if that can be shortened, I think yes, that's definitely going to be helpful one if one want to look at it. At the same time, I would also want to commend on in terms of the way SEBI has reacted, especially when the IBC regulations came in, because Electrosteel was the first of its kind where a listed company was under liquidation,
Yeah.
and there was virtually it was going to get delisted.
Yeah.
And the timely changes that SEBI had gotten, I think that has helped the IBC process to an extent. Definitely, it has cut down the time. The stock exchanges in SEBI, it definitely it had worked hand in hand in terms of to resolve the process in a much shorter time that was actually provided for in the IBC.
What's my last rapid fire question? I'll start with you, Mehul. Deal of the decade. What would you name? M&A deal of the decade.
Walmart, Flipkart,
Okay. The deal that caught you by surprise.
Airtel, Tata deal,
The deal you wish you would have done or advised on.
the Vodafone Idea.
Great. Now my question to you. If you are stuck in an elevator with MS Sahu, what would be your pitch to him on IBC?
My pitch, and we keep talking that I mean you keep it a level playing field, and rules of the game should be clearly laid out. It should not change very often, and it should be a subjective process, and all of which he agrees. So,
And what was the deal which caught you by surprise?
I think SR Steel, the way things moved and the way the whole process ultimately resulted in a certain transfer of control. I mean, it was surprising at the pace at which it came.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having this insightful conversation. We spoke about quite a few things. We spoke about the good, bad, ugly of the IBC. We spoke about how India is thinking about M&A. We spoke about, how M&A is it for 2020. Thank you for those insights. All the time, we see you next. Goodbye and good luck.